Welcome to this GRCI Law IT Governance webinar on data breaches, entitled Before and After They Occur. So, a couple of introductions. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, don't know me, my name is John Potts and I'm the Director of Operations at GRCI Law. I've been with GRCI Law now for about 3.5 years, or getting on for 3.5 years. Prior to which I was Head of Information and Security at the Met Police. My role within GRCI Law is I look after all the outsourced data protection officers, cyber incident response team, contract and legal, and everything that comes under GRCI Law, run by myself and the and the sales director, Christine McLean. And between us, we're responsible for everything that happens in here. Cliff.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Cliff Martin, and I'm the lead for cyber incident response within GRCI Law. So I've been with the group since April last year, and prior to that, I was working in cybersecurity related field in the defence sector, and now I just run cyber incident response. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff. Okay, a couple of reminders then for about today. If we can ask you to be muted, I think we're muting you centrally, so to speak, but if you can remember to put yourself on mute. Submit any questions that you've got in the chat box, and hopefully we'll have time and we'll get round to, we'll answer those at the end. So please submit your questions. If we don't get to your questions during the presentation, we will make sure they're answered as soon as we can after the presentation. So please submit them. We've already got a couple of questions in there, so please let's have them. And once the presentation is finished, we'll email you a copy of the slides and the recording, so you've got that. Okay. A little bit about IT governance and GRCI Law. That's what you'd expect on one of these things. 20 years this year that IT governance first came about. We've got about 200 members of staff, covering a whole myriad of subjects related to information governance, IT security, risk and compliance solutions. As we say, you can see there, we've got over 12,000 clients across 6 continents. Just an interesting point there that we've undertaken over 1,000 penetration tests since we've been in operation. And as you can see, GRCI Law fit into the whole makeup of the GRCI group, with sister companies GDPR.co.uk, which is also run by GRCI Law. That's our schools division. We've got Vigilant, we've got DQM, and all the other component parts that go up to make the group, all there to provide you with that first line of defense, that defense in depth for data privacy, information security, and cyber security. Thanks, Cliff. So today's agenda then, what we're going to be looking at is the types of data breaches organizations face in today's cybersecurity landscape. And we'll cover a couple of things on there that are easy to get bogged down with cybersecurity in the landscape that we're in at the present, forgetting that there are lots of other breaches still happening out there. We look at the data breach process organizations should implement to minimize the risk of a data breach. What your organization should do to prepare for a data breach, and what happens once a data breach is identified. As we say, it's an adage that it's not if, it's when the data breach is identified or when it happens. And then hopefully to give you some practical solutions to handle a data breach, what you should be doing once that data breach has been discovered. Okay, thanks, Cliff. Whether it's a defense mechanism or not, but certainly what I'm getting back from my team of DPOs, and I get from my own clients, because I run clients, obviously I've got clients in the group as well. So whether it's a defense mechanism, but something that data controllers, when we're talking to them, have difficulty in almost admitting sometimes, is that they've had a data breach. And you get the question, is it really a breach, John? Do you think it's a breach? Well, I think the Information Commissioner's, the ICO's definition is pretty much there. A personal data breach means a breach of security leading to the accidental or unlawful destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure of, or access to personal data. This includes breaches that are the result of both accidental and deliberate causes. It also means that a breach is more than just about losing personal data. To me, that's one of the best definitions that the ICO has ever put out, because it encapsulates everything and almost leaves no room for questioning on that. So what constitutes a data breach? Unauthorized access by an external threat actor. As I said, in this climate, it's very often, it's quite easy to get bogged down and think that there's a whole raft of state actors out there waiting to get at us, the external threat that Russia's going to invade and invade our cyberspace. Remember, it's not always a state. Sometimes it's a lone hacker operating from their back bedroom, but it's still a breach. Viewing of data by by inappropriate members of staff. It's an old adage, but there's still a need to know. That still rings true today. If staff don't need access, don't give them access. I used to have a boss, and her view was, and she used to make a big thing of it, quite rightly so, that whenever you get up and leave your desk, Control, Alt, Delete whenever you leave your seat. As I say, it sounds silly now, but how much would that stop people just glancing down at your computer, at your screen when you walk away? Sending personal data to incorrect recipients. The good old favorite use of to instead of BCC in an email. The use of autofill within an email, one of the major causes of data breaches. The balance there is, do you take everybody off autofill and punish 99.9% or whatever for the 1% that can't get it right? Sometimes it's not just using the drop downs, it's whether people fully understand the rules regarding BCC, replying to a BCC email, etc. So that's a data breach. Theft of devices, of course, is the classic. But if the device is encrypted, then it may lessen the breach. It may even constitute a breach. If you can wipe that device, it's encrypted, and you can wipe it before anybody gets to it, may not even be a breach. Point to get across here, and if we don't cover it later, it's one of my harping on points. That a laptop that's closed is not encrypted. A laptop that's closed down fully and then closed is encrypted. Amazing how many members of staff don't realise that. Alteration of personal data. Is that by a disgruntled member of staff? Somebody who's got access to other people's data and just out of devilment changes it, or because they say disgruntled member of staff, disgruntled spouse or partner. So alteration of personal data. And the loss of availability of data. This is the one that we're finding now is tripping up data controllers, whether it's a fire, whether it's a flood, an act of God or something like that, that stops people getting access, that stops data subject getting access to their data. That does constitute a data breach. So just because you can't see it, data's not there anymore, doesn't mean it's not a data breach. If there's a loss of availability of that data, then that could well constitute a data breach. Okay, Cliff, over to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. Really in depth. The types of data breaches organisations face in today's cyber landscape. So as John mentioned, whilst we are going to talk about cyber security and the types of incidents that may occur that could become a breach, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the be all and end all. So just with what you can see on the screen now. So this is a chart that was produced by the ICO, and they do this every year, which provides you with the number of reported data breaches that the ICO are aware of. Now, as you can see from the from the chart there, and we've got it split between non-cyber security incidents and cyber security incidents. So basically, the non-cyber security incidents is the things that John was talking about. You know, it's the need to know, it's the bits of paper on people's desks where people are not meant to have sight of that, but they manage to, those sort of things. But if you can see, so John mentioned before, he mentioned the emails. So as you can see, the second one from the left, 397, that's 397 reported incidents where the data breach was occurred because of data that was emailed to the wrong recipient, to the wrong person. Now, be that just somebody's put in the wrong address, or they've put it in the wrong area of the email. That's the biggest cause of data breaches in. I should add to this that it's the financial year of 2021 and 2022, which is between October and December of 2021 that this information was taken from. So that's only a couple of months that, as you can see, there's a wide range of breaches that occurred and were reported to the ICO. Now these numbers could be a lot bigger, as you can imagine. This is only what we know of. So some of the other examples, so we've got the data emailed. The next biggest one there in the middle is other non-cybersecurity related. So this is just people having access to information they shouldn't have access to. Or it could be, as John mentioned, the acts of God, you know, the fire, the floods, those sort of things that constitute a data breach, the availability of that information. And then further down from a cybersecurity perspective, we've got the phishing as well, which again is from an email perspective, but it's still one of the biggest ways that an attacker will compromise an environment by tricking the user to do something they wouldn't normally do in some instance. And then, as you can imagine, shortly after that, we've got a ransomware that is steadily increasing. You'll see with a lot of these, if you do go to have a look at the report that the ICO has produced, you'll see that ransomware is continually growing, and I think that's probably going to overtake some of these in the near future. So that's just a snippet of what the ICO have presented and produced, and you can freely go and have a look at that information. So if I move on, John, over to you again.
Okay, so the data breach process organizations should implement to minimize risk. And this is, as I say, actually being able to do away with the risk is probably a little bit, to get rid of it fully, it's probably not within our gift. But what we can do is minimize that risk down to an absolute minimum. The first thing that you need to do is understand the risk that is relevant to your organization. Is two-factor authentication something that you need? I would say yes, whatever you're doing. If you're using personal data and you're using devices, then TFA is probably something you need to look at. Look at the level of data, the type of data you're processing, the amount of data you're processing. Understand that risk. And just a point here, make sure that risk is highlighted. Make sure that people in the know, that people that need to know the risk. What risk is that data posing to you as an organization? And what risk is the way that you are handling that data posing to the data subject? Training. It's not just a matter of paying lip service to training, it's the first line of defense. It's making sure that everybody in your organization is not only trained and knows what to do, but that training's recorded, because to my mind, this is your first line of defense. When there is an incident, then you've got to be able to say, right, we did everything. We had training in place. This is going to mitigate your the way the ICO is going to look at you if you've done that training. Things will happen, but it's that training. And it's true. Again, you know, the old saying, I think it was Sevi Ballesteros that said, it seems strange that the more he practiced, the luckier he got when he was playing golf. It's true here. The more training you have, the luckier you'll get when it comes down to data breaches. Believe you me, record that training. Make sure that training keeps pace with what is happening out there. At the moment, we should be looking at cyber incidents because all organizations at this time are subject to cyber incident attacks. Make sure people are aware of that, but don't lose sight of everything else. Technical solutions. Cliff's the man for our technical solutions here, and the other parts of the group, looking at the technical solutions that we can do to give you that defense in depth for looking after your personal data and then minimizing the risk there. In fact, we're running a future webinar on that, so we will be looking at that point. Cliff, would you say anything about technical solutions at this stage?
Yeah, exactly what you just highlighted then. So it's when looking at the risks, as you mentioned before, understand the risk and then put your controls in place that are proportionate to that risk. Obviously, you're not going to spend a few £1,000,000 to protect something that only costs £10. You know, it's I know that's quite excessive, but having that defense in depth, as John mentioned, and being able to understand and put those controls in place to help the user and help to minimize that risk, go a very long way. Obviously, we mentioned before about the end user being the easiest way to compromise a network, and as we've seen with the ICO stats before, from users making mistakes, phishing, those sort of things, tech solutions can help, but they're not the be end or end. They're not the only sort of controls you should put in place, though.
Thanks, Cliff. We've got policies in there, and it's not just about having policies that are a high-level document that people can, pat themselves on the back and get promoted on the back of writing and putting in place and this and the other. Do people understand the policies that you've got? Have you got a policy to say, and we'll look at how these fit into breaches later on, but have you got a policy that people understand? Have you got a policy that's accessible to people? If you've got people that are, if you're members of staff that perhaps don't have access to corporate systems because they are, I don't know, just working in there, they're not part of the system, they might be contractors, so they've not got full access to it. So does it mean that you print your policies off, pin them up? Make sure that people read them, make sure you've got a policy in place and people know what they are. Processes, a little bit like training, really. If you have a process, people know what to do. They know what they're meant to be doing. And again, we'll go through this later, but again, you've got a process, you practice that process, a little bit like training. That's going to impact on the way that you are attacked and the way that you react to an attack. I've put BYOD on here specifically, and the reason I put that on here is that as we're emerging out of when we went into lockdown and everything started to happen very, very quickly, and organizations didn't have enough systems enough laptops and monitors and everything else to go around, then bring your own device to work and use your own device became the flavor. The ICO had already preempted that and started work, and as we know, they had guidelines and everything in place on there. But as we start to come out of that, and perhaps people are going back into the office, or perhaps they're not, perhaps they're staying at home, perhaps that's the system that works best for your organization. But BYOD is one of those things that we need to look at on a regular basis. If we put that in place, then let's make sure it's updated, that we are making sure that people are using the right patches and everything else that's going to protect our data on there. It's been running for a while now. We've been using it. When I say we, organizations have been using it. So let's make sure that something like your BYOD policy is up to date. People understand it. It's one of those things that can get left behind if you're not careful. Thanks, Cliff. Okay, what your organization should do then to prepare for a data breach. We've talked about training, and we've talked about policies, and we've talked about processes, technical solutions, bit of practical things here. If all of your systems go down, if you're in the middle of something and your screen freezes and there's nothing in there, and you think, oh my gosh, I need to ring IT and report this immediately. I should just go to my folder that's marked IT contact numbers. Oh gosh, my system is frozen. I can't get into that. Make sure that people have got a contact list. If it's only a couple of numbers, make sure those numbers are relevant. Make sure people are resourcing them, that there's people at the other end to answer those. But we have one here. We have a list of emergency contacts that we can phone should our system go down. Something quite as simple as that. Obviously, make sure that list is secured, and then we go back again to policies and procedures. But make sure you've got a contact list that isn't stored on a system that perhaps you can't get to. Roles and responsibilities. Make sure people understand. And again, we've got a flow chart later that we'll see, but make sure people understand their roles and responsibilities when it comes down to a data breach. Make sure people that you put in that role are still in that role. If somebody moves on, for whatever reason, leaves the organization, promoted, moves to another part, changes telephone numbers, then make sure that those roles are updated, that people know who on that contact list they can contact. The last thing you want to do is to have to ring 4 or 5 people when your system's frozen because nobody's available, etc. So make sure that people know what their role is, what they're responsible for, so that only one person is doing this, only one person is doing that, and you're not going to mess up people. Posters, again, sounds a little bit old-fashioned, sort of circa 1970s. Have the various posters on the bedroom wall. I'm not suggesting that everybody working from home has a poster on there, but what about back in the office? Just have a poster on there. What to do in the event of a data breach? Just a very simple who to contact. Have them around there so they become part of everyday life in the office, that people see them. So have the posters around there. Have them printed off. Let people see them. And again, make sure that if you do change things, that you change the posters. It's not easy to hack a poster. That's the other thing. Okay, one of the things that I've introduced in previous organizations and had introduced is an icon to quickly raise a breach notification. I know that goes against the first one, where you can't do that if you've got a frozen system, but if you haven't, or if you hit on a phishing email or something like that, have an icon on the desktop that you can just open up. And it's a very, very simple couple of questions that you can just fire off, and it goes directly to the people that need it. IT or information security, governance, or whatever. And again, make sure that it's resourced. Make sure there's somebody there to receive it. So there's just some practical solutions there that you can do to prepare for that data breach. Your contact list, roles and responsibility, posters perhaps. And if you've got an icon on your desktop that can quickly send a message to the people that need to pick it up.
Okay, just continuing on from what John's talked about. So, it's important that organizations understand what data you're trying to protect and where is it stored. If you were to have a data breach, how would you know? Does your organization have the capability to be able to investigate and determine how the data breach occurred? So it's simple things like, where are the logs for certain systems? Where is data stored? Who has access to that data? How is that managed? So just on this slide and the next slide, there's some key considerations that organizations should be aware of, and maybe questions that you ask within your own environment is, the first one, do you know where the organization stores personal or sensitive data? And that's quite trivial, but it's all good and well to say, well, we store this database on that server, but have you considered things like metadata in documents, databases that people are working on, emails, those sort of things? Do you understand where all that data is? And do you have the capability that if there is a data breach, you can then investigate how that data breach occurred? The next one there, so do you have security controls in place to restrict who has access to information? So John mentioned before about documentation and technical controls, but there is other things like physical access as well. Are there are those controls in place mitigating the risk of somebody, exfiltrating or leaking that information? Is there a capability of the organization so it's protecting that information? And the third one there, so do you have the capability to review those security controls? Now this could be as excessive as conducting a penetration test, a vulnerability assessment, or is it just as basic as a checklist that says, okay, if I try to log into that system with this account, can I access what I'm supposed to access? Okay, if I try to log in with this account, a guest account, for example, can I still access that resource or that information? And hopefully it's a no if that's the way the system is set up. It's simple things that you can look at within your organization. Now, we do recommend having vulnerability and penetration tests of IT systems just so that you can establish where the vulnerabilities exist, but you've got to get the fundamentals correct first and then work on looking at applying those more advanced controls.
Yeah, I think you're right, Cliff. Sorry, just going back on the second point that you raised there about having the security there is it could well be, as you've said before, something quite simple. If you've got secure data, do you allow people to have the mobile phones in there that have got recording capabilities, or is that data of such a nature that that's one of the things that you need to look at? I know there are people on this call that at various levels of vetting where you have things called within certain environments where you're not allowed to take a mobile phone in or any kind of recording device. Is that something your organization needs to look at? We protect everything, but people can take photographs of screenshots and everything like that. So you need to really drill down into this security piece. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with that. And it doesn't just go for mobile phones and those sort of things. We're starting to have these devices in cars to monitor conditions on the road. The the little cameras that you can have for traffic, for example. Now, depending on where you are driving to, can you actually record that information, or does it pick up information that you wouldn't necessarily be aware of? You know, in the car park, for example, are you recording personal information on things like that? So just continuing on from the considerations that was mentioned before then. So does your organization have logs that would identify who has accessed the information and when? So I was talking about the simple checks and balances that you can do, the fundamental controls. But if somebody was accessing that information, would you ever know? Would you know if somebody who wasn't meant to access that information had accessed it? Do you have the logs? Are those logs secure? Are they preserved in case you need to then investigate a data breach further down the line? Moving on to the next one then. So does your organization have the tools and knowledge to review those logs? So it's all good and well to say, yes, we use Windows in our environment, and by default it's recording all these fantastic logs. Do you know what you're looking at? Do you have the capability to understand and be able to investigate that issue? And I keep saying investigate. But are you looking at the right logs? Are you recording, both the people that have accessed resources and those that have been rejected or denied access? Both of which is important when determining who has done certain things on a network. The third one then, so what would happen if these logs were deleted on a device? Are they backed up? And if so, how frequently? And when was the last time you checked that backup? So like I said, it's all good and well having those logs, if you don't review those logs and then all of a sudden you have a data breach and then let's say the ICO is asking the question, well, when did they access the information? How long have they had access to it? And you come to have a look at the logs and you found out the hacker that was on the network actually went and deleted all those logs. What would you do? How would you investigate that? You're not going to turn around to the ICO and say, I don't know. I don't know. They've deleted the logs. We don't have any other capability in place. And that's where things like centralized logging can come in, or backing up your event logs and system logs to ensure the integrity of those, and that if anything does happen, you can then refer back to and review those logs. Next one there. So how often does your organization check the logs for unauthorized access or abnormal behavior? So we've talked a little bit about that already. And then the final one there, if your organization was compromised by, let's say, ransomware, for example, which is quite big at the minute, would your organization pay? I don't know, that's everybody's probably got an answer in their mind now, but if that was to happen to your organization and all your information was you were locked out of it, would your organization be forced to pay that? Is there certain scenarios where you may pay or you may not pay? It's those sort of things that you need to sort of establish and agree up front before it actually happens. Because, if you haven't already had a cyber incident before and you've not been through that process, it can be very stressful and very distressing. And the organization is looking to just recover as quickly as possible. But if it's something like ransomware, where you don't have the decryption key in order to access that information, are you going to pay? It's a perfectly valid question, and one that we see more often than not.
I think statistically, Cliff, as well, isn't there something that says that, and I don't think I'm making this stat up, that something like 80% of organizations that do pay the ransom for ransomware release are actually hit again within the next year, I think it is, that they are hit again by the same hackers.
Yeah, absolutely. Or other hackers where they've shared the information, they've shared the vulnerabilities that they used. But yeah, John's absolutely right. It's very common for an organization which has been attacked to be re-attacked in either the near future or later on. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So next one that we're going to talk about is what happens once a data breach is identified. So we've talked about the controls that you could put in place and the things that you need to consider up to that point, but what do you do if it actually happens? I'll start off. So the first one is don't panic. I mentioned before, cyber incidents are very stressful and can be very distressing for certain individuals within the organization. If you don't have a plan in place, you'll see people reacting very quickly, and they might not make the most informed decisions, which could lead to further implications further down the line. So key steps when responding to a data breach or a cyber incident is, the first one is to contain that issue. Make sure that whatever happens, you've managed to contain the issue and you've managed to isolate it so that the impact of that attack is not continuing. The next one is eradication. So eradicating the issue, that could be as simple as changing usernames and passwords. It could be rebuilding systems, those sort of things. And then the final one there is recovering those systems and then monitoring those systems to ensure that the repeated breach is not happened again. And coming back to that quote John mentioned before, that John mentioned, ensuring that the organization isn't being breached again through either the same or similar mechanism that happened before. So following on to that, so as we respond to a data breach, you need to also establish what the impact of that data breach is. Is it a small or a large subset of information that's been targeted? And John will go a bit more into depth in that in just a sec. The next question is the data breach reportable? To both its supervisory authority and any other reportable requirements that your organization or industry may have. And then the final one there is, what lessons did you learn from this experience? Any activity is a learning opportunity, so far as if you have suffered a cyber incident, what did you learn from that? How can you make sure that that doesn't happen again, or the risk of that happening again is very unlikely? It's that lessons learned, the post-incident review that's crucial, and that should be fed back into your capability to ensure that you can react faster next time. So, just moving on, and then John will after this slide. So if you do need help, so you've had a data breach, you need help, it's not a bad thing. You don't be ashamed for asking for help if you've suffered a data breach. You know, there are multiple organizations out there that can help you in the event of a data breach or a cyber incident. Obviously, we are one of them. You know, we try to present our services. But you know, don't be ashamed of asking for help, and get the help in as soon as possible if you don't already have the capability, because the longer you leave it, the bigger impact it is to your organization. So the next one there, so it is crucial that if you do happen to bring anyone in, that they have all the information that they need in order to respond to that incident, effectively and as soon as possible. If you withheld information because you think, well, they don't really need to know that, then it could impact later on. So just putting all the cards on the table to say, we've had this incident, this is what our infrastructure looks like, this is how we this is how you can access it, this is where the logs are, those sort of things. And then your incident response team can then look at and come up with a plan that's suitable for the incident. And then the final one there, obviously, GRCI law can support your organization in the event of a data breach from both a cyber incident response and a data breach as well. We do work hand in hand from a technical and the data breach side as well, and that's, engaging with the supervisory authorities, for example. So, John.
Okay, thanks, Cliff. So some practical steps then, coming on the practical side. Who needs to know? One of the first questions that we have to ask is the breach recordable or reportable? And this is where we're going to weigh up the high risk to the rights and freedoms of the data subjects, the amount of subjects, the type of data, the exposure. Who's seen that data? A report that's gone to one solicitor's office when it was meant for another solicitor's office may not constitute the same level of breach as if that report had gone out on 127 emails to other clients and customers. So it is that report or record. If we are recording, if we decide that we're not going to report for whatever reason, but we're going to put it on our record log, then we're going to do a really comprehensive rationale for not reporting it. Because in the event of a major breach that does need reporting next time, the RTO may want to say, how many other incidents have you had like this and why were they not reported? So we are going to maintain that log that we've got. So report or record's the first decision we're going to make. We're also going to look at how quickly, or do we need to inform the data subjects? What is the level of risk? How high is that risk to the data subjects? Is it their name and their email address? Or is it their name, their national insurance number, their bank details, medical information? What is it? Do we need to inform the data subject? How quickly do we need to inform the data subject? How effective is our method of informing them? How high is that risk? That's the thing that we've got to look at all the time. Very often we'll hear from data controllers, well, if we do that, that will leave us exposed. Yeah, if you don't do that, you're going to be a lot more exposed. If you've got data subjects who are going to suffer individual loss from it. How can we get people out of there? Can we use our website? Of course you can. If you look at something like British Airways, when they had their breach, when they eventually decided to report it, they put it on their website that they had a breach. Not that they needed to, it was all over the BBC and the other media outlets, but they used their website. A couple of years ago, when one of the education systems was infiltrated and hacked, lots of academies and schools needed to use their website to get across to people that there had been a breach and their data was accessible by threat actors, by bad guys. So use the website. Think of a media strategy. Whoever you are, think about a media strategy, the what if. In the civil service and the police, it's called a if asked. Have that strategy ready so that if you are asked, there's one version of what's going out there. This is what happened. This is what's happened. We've self-referred to the information commissioner or whatever. Have that media strategy ready. ready to go. And again, as part of the system that we operate when we're advising on our emergency breach or our breach retainer service, whether that's on data breaches or on the CIR side, then we can advise on the wording that you might want to put on your website, how you will inform the data subject, whether to report or record, what needs to be in your media strategy that's not going to leave you further open. Okay, thanks, Cliff. Okay, some practical steps then to handle a data breach. There's quite a few in here, but you can look at this in slower time. But basically, this is if it's one breach, you discover the breach, assemble the breach team. If you've got a data breach team, this is your policy, roles and responsibilities. Have a look at the preliminary assessment. Complete the initial assessment to the breach. If it impacts on business continuity, sort that out. Is the breach being compounded whilst you're sitting around discussing what's happening? Is the threat actor still in there? Certainly Cliff has dealt with a job quite recently where I think it's fair to say, Cliff, in very simple terms, the attack was still happening while it was being reported to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not uncommon as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So get in there. Do you need to pull the plug? Do you need to stop systems? What will happen if you do that? Containment and recovery. Cliff has talked about that. He's talked about containing it. Notify other relevant parties. Consider any other regulatory or contractual requirements you may have. Who else needs to know that you've had a data breach? Data subjects, we've just discussed whether we're going to discuss it, whether we're going to inform the data subject, how we're going to do that. Notify the regulator. Again, we're making that decision, report or record. There may be other regulators that you need to inform as well. So that's the thing we need to look at. So we need to look at that all, as we've got in there, I think Sean has just said that all data breaches need to be recorded. They don't all need to be reported. We've got notify the regulator. That's just a very rough guide to give you some food for thought on what you need to do there.
Okay.
Okay, so how can we help you with this? Some practical solutions to handle data breaches that we've got there. Okay, we've got a retained data breach management service. So when you do have a data breach, it is literally a case of picking the phone up. You've already registered with us and we can start dealing with your data breach immediately. We're open at the same time that the ICO is open. So when it comes to the 72-hour reporting, if need be, then we can pick that up and deal with that. Cliff.
Yeah, so we on the slide there we've got the cyber incident response retainer. So if you were to have a breach, it's the ability for us to immediately respond and support your organization without the commercial issues and the delays that sometimes it can cause, not all the time, but by having that retainer in place, it allows us to respond. We do provide a host of other cyber incident response services as well if you are interested or you do need support, which includes things like an emergency cyber incident response, readiness assessments, tabletop exercises to test and assess your capability when it comes to cyber incident response.
Okay, we've got our DPO as a service, which is a fully holistic view of all the services that we do. It's an outsourced service. So we take over that and our adage of our expertise, your peace of mind. And data breach fits into that. You can call us and discuss data breaches, cyber breaches, things like that we can deal with. We've got the data privacy manager service. This is where it's all part of our privacy as a service, where you perhaps have a DPO in place, but that DPO needs some assistance. There are organizations out there now, I can see some people out there now that are DPOs, but they need that assistance from our service, and we can provide that there. We've got the breach track service delivered by our sister company DQM. Enables you to monitor data used by both employees and your supply chain. So you can track your data even when it leaves the building and moves beyond your direct control. So these are the services that we can provide. Okay, how to get in touch with us? Obviously IT governance and specifically GRCI law. Love to hear from you. Email us, drop us a line. If we can help, we will. The services are out there. We're launching the CIR services, the Cyber Incident Response Service. We're launching an emergency service. We're launching a retainer service. Instant access during working hours, 24-hour coverage on phones and what have you, recorded messages, and then we'll pick that up. So we've got that service. We've got the data breach service, we've got the cyber incident response service, and we work together. So it's a full package of cyber incident and data breach working together, what needs to be dealt with at the time when the inevitable happens. Okay, questions. We've had certainly had a couple in previously. I'm just looking what it was there. We mentioned other organisations that may need to be informed that you've had an incident. It will be that depending on what sector you're in, then the Care Quality Commission needs to be informed. The NHS might need to be informed. There are lots of organisations where it is part of your regulatory requirement to inform people. We can assist you with that. We deal with the NHS toolkit. There are subtle nuances when reporting data breaches to the Care Quality Commission about whether it's a malicious intent or whether it's accidental, whether it's criminal. There are subtleties that need looking at there. In the banking industry, does the FSA need to be informed? So there are lots of regulatory bodies that may or may not need to be informed at the same time that you discuss with the ICO, that you inform the ICO. Had a question about jurisdictions. Are all jurisdictions the same about reporting? No, they're not. In some parts of Europe, parts of the EU, reporting requirements are not the same. So again, it's that jurisdictional piece. Do you need to inform other areas of Europe if you've had a data breach? Now that we're not part of the one-stop shop, now that the UK ICO is not part of the one-stop shop, do you need to inform other jurisdictions? The answer is yes in some cases, no in others. But we've got that expertise within GRCI law to assist you.
We've had a couple of other questions come in during the webinar, John, which you might be able to answer. So if I just read this first one out. So does the data subject always need to be informed? Sorry, the chat's just changed. You know, for example, if a list of names is sent to the wrong person.
We're going to look at that, what it is that is on that data. Is a list of names going to constitute a high risk to that person? So if it's just a list of names, obviously without knowing exactly what's on there, and we can only talk in general terms. So you've got to assess what is the risk to the people on that list. Do they all need to be informed? Again, what is the risk to them? So we're going to look at whether it needs to be, whether the ICO needs to be informed, or the other regulatory bodies, or other supervisory authorities, or whether the individual, and that's going to depend on all the points that we spoke about: the type of data, the amount of data, the risk to that person, to that individual.
Okay. We've got another scenario-based question here, John. It's quite a long one, but might be more of your street as well. Imagine Zach accidentally sends an email to his work email to his girlfriend. To his ex-girlfriend. This email contains several attachments concerning confidential information about a particular client, e.g. trade secrets, Clearly, there is a data breach, unauthorized access. I can imagine that Zach's first response would be to tell his friend to delete the email and all documents attached to it, as well as confirm that she has deleted the data. Is confirmation enough? Is Zach sufficiently dealing with the data breach?
Well, of course, Zach needs to inform somebody that the data breach has occurred. We need to set in motion that chain of events that we talked about, because it is a data breach. The fact that it's a disgruntled girlfriend, or an ex-girlfriend, sorry, doesn't really matter. The data breach needs to be reported internally in the first instance. Don't let's get mixed up there. Again, we need to know what the data is. It may be commercial information, but is it personal information? Don't forget that we're dealing here with personal information. Commercial information may be a whole different ball game, and I suspect somebody may have a look at Zach's employment as to why his girlfriend's or even an ex-girlfriend's email address was on his work email anyway.
A follow-up question to that, same person. Following this question, how does confirmation need to be provided? Is it a simple message saying I have deleted the email and all the documents attached to it? Is that enough?
I suppose the bounce back question would be, what else can you expect? Short of going around there, seizing the computer, making sure it's been deleted, etc. It may well be that's all you've got to send out. And if you can't recall it, if Zach couldn't recall it once you realised what had happened and it had been sent, then yeah, all you can hope for is to say, can you confirm that you deleted? That you deleted the information. I have had instances where doctor surgery, where a medical record had been posted through the wrong door, and somebody was sent around to recover that personally. That was different because it was actually a parcel. We didn't ask the person to destroy it. We asked them to hang on to it, not open it, not read it, and we went around and collected it physically. So I think, what else can you do? I'm afraid the answer is there's very little else you can do. You obviously have to record that response, and of course bear in mind that if that person then, or Zach's ex-girlfriend, and if it's the Zach I'm thinking of, I can see why it's an ex-girlfriend. But if the ex-girlfriend then uses that data or whatever for her own means, then she may well be in breach of the act herself.
Okay, that's all the questions I can see. I don't know if anyone else has any questions to put in.
No? Okay, I think just to wind up, it is a case of assess everything that you've got in the event of a data breach. When it happens, who are you going to inform, what you need to do, who needs to know, how are you going to inform them? Then look at, are you going to inform people? And from Cliff's side, how are you going to stop that breach, that cyber incident continuing? How are you going to stop it and how are you going to recover from it? And also, can you collect the evidence? Can you maintain the evidence and keep the evidence that's required for any further investigation?
Yep, thank you. I completely agree. All right, well, that's it from us.
Sorry, Cliff, there's just one question. Sorry,
Does it just come in? Sorry.
Can you perform some form of data privacy maturity assessment to check current state and then provide roadmap to improvement? Yes, we can. Yeah, we've got two systems there. One is our GAPA analysis that will cover your GDPR requirements to look at where you are now, where you need to be, and then encapsulates your security systems, your breach processes, etc. And then there's the cyber incident readiness assessment, which Cliff is running, which will do exactly the same for your cyber incident. In the event of an attack, how well prepared are you now and what do you need to go, and on both of those we'll provide you the roadmap to put you there, to get you where you need to be in a stronger position.
Yeah, absolutely. We just had another question come in, John. I hope you don't mind. When recording incidents internally, are there any commonly used templates that we can download from anywhere? Any good examples that you can recommend?
I'm not sure whether the ICO has a template breach register. I'm not sure. Otherwise, you could sign up to GRCI law and we'll provide you with one. The most important thing is, on a serious note, is that you do record comprehensively. It's not always necessary to report, but it is always necessary to record a confirmed breach without a doubt. Can't strongly enough put that across, because the time may come, as I say, when you do have a reportable breach and you need to look back on what you've done. And of course, that record will enable you to make sure that you are learning from things that have happened and the right people are informed, because that could form a risk. And as we said, that needs feeding up the line when you're assessing your risk, so that the heads, the board, etc., can assess that risk.
When recording incidents, John, sorry, this was a question I had. Could you use something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, for example?
Yeah, don't see why not. Although those of you that know me will know that I'm a great believer in that. If the answer is an Excel spreadsheet, you're probably asking the wrong question. But yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that, as long as it records the information and it records as fully as you can that information. It doesn't need to be a super duper all singing, all dancing, but it needs to be recorded. Every incident needs to be recorded.
Okay. Sorry, something just come in. You have mentioned not knowing what you don't know. The difficulty comes when staff, etc., don't report a breach as simple as misdirecting emails.
Yeah, but that's where your training comes in, and the ethos that you have within the organization, the culture of not having a blame culture. Mistakes happen. There's no two ways about it. And in all the years that I've been working with the ICO, the one thing that the ICO I've found with the ICO is that they have a pragmatic approach to business, and they understand that human error, people make mistakes. What you need to get across, what we need to get across as managers and business owners, etc., is this ethos that it's all right to tell somebody. People need to know that it's not necessarily the incident, it's the not reporting it that could be the problem, because that exposes everybody in the company. So it's getting that ethos and that culture of a non-blame culture.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. 2 minutes to spare, Claire.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No more come in, I promise. Not that I can see anyway. No. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining this webinar. I hope everybody's found it useful and come away with something at least. Like John said, please get in touch if we can help with anything.
Thanks much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.